What is up, players? It's your Slayer, Major Broski, coming at you with another episode of Legends Lounge with, of course, the best, the famous DeadBrokeNerd. I hope you guys are getting ready for this awesome Thanksgiving season and Black Friday sales and all the chaos that comes with that. Uh, anyways, welcome to the show. If you don't mind, DeadBrokeNerd, go ahead and talk about what Legend Lounge is about in general and what this episode is about in particular.
Yeah, Legends Lounge is just trying to add to the awesome community that supports the Elder Scrolls Legends, and we are a talk show that focuses on all sorts of things, but and sort of trying to be a little bit more inclusive of the wider spectrum of players that play the game. So newer players, players that maybe haven't quite hit Legend yet, or are still trying to, figure out some sort of trying to figure out how to build a meta deck or what they should craft. So we sort of run the gamut, both from the casual to competitive spectrum of topics. And today, what we're doing is putting a focus back on some newer players. Or just players that maybe want to get a little bit better at some of the base mechanics. So we're going to be mainly focusing on talking about the dual lane mechanic that is entirely unique to Elder Scrolls Legends and has a lot of complexity and makes things pretty, situational. And so, how do you figure out which lane is best? We're going to sort of talk about them in broad strokes, as well as a little bit of specific advice along the way. We're also going to talk about the rune system and sort of, how the rune system works and how you can identify how to approach breaking your opponent's runes based on the matchup. We're also going to touch on the Ring of Magicka and talk about how good is this for the game and what sort of strategies does it enable. And talk about sort of the discussion that's been going on for, I don't know, over the last year about the Ring of Magicka and potential changes that people might want to see in it. Just sort of making it open form, and then we'll end with a Q&A.
Cool. Yeah. So, big thing about the Q&A is we try to hold the questions till the end of the session. Just because we're recording this, putting this to YouTube, and after episode 5, we're going to try to upload this to a podcasting service, so it's going to be easier for our viewers and listeners in the future. So with that being said, we decided to add a news section at the beginning of our talk show, just to kind of give an update on any feedback within the community within the past week. If nothing's going on, at least we can give an update on the tournaments that happened throughout the week. But we've ever since Sparky Pants has become the developers, we've actually been getting a lot of news. So as long as they stay active, I think we're gonna have a lot of news to keep on coming for nearly every week. For starters, we just got the 2.4 patch that just came out. There is a lot of patch notes with this one. I just kind of wanted to point out some of the things that I found interesting about the patch notes. Here's some of the highlights. The requirements for Android is now down to operating system 4.3. So this allows people that have like an older operating system to play the game, which is really awesome. That expands the community for people who might not have access to a computer, who might have an older Android phone. So that's just really awesome, and we want to welcome those players to the community. Spectator, I've watched other people spectate, and it's kind of interesting too because they actually use spectator mode for tournaments, and so at the end of a game it abruptly ends, and so spectators now will no longer have the abrupt cutout. I haven't actually seen that in action, but they said they fixed it, so there you go. A couple of card updates. They have animations for Cast Out and Unrelenting Force. They've both been updated. So that's just something that I found a little bit interesting. They also added quite a few more animations and fixed a couple of things which I find interesting. Now, one thing that was really cool for all of us players is the Festivals of Madness. Yes, each day. I think it's for the next 10 days, right? How many days is it?
Either a week or 10 days. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, you go ahead and Google that while I explain what the Festivals of Madness is. For every day, the Prince of Madness, Sheogorath himself, has decided to kindly give us deals on the Elder Scrolls Legends. That's the reason why we're calling this the Festivals of Madness. Just yesterday, we got the 9 packs, core packs for 100 gold. I don't know what they have today. I do want to note that there is some skepticism around this. Hiking Emmerich said on his Twitter page that they actually had a deal like this a few weeks before the Morrowind set came out. to try to get people to spend as much as their gold as they possibly can. But he retracted that statement the next day on Twitter too. I also want to say that because the nine core packs for 100 gold, I mean that's really awesome. So I don't know, for you skeptical players out there, maybe hold on to your gold. But I don't see the point of being skeptical. That's just me. And not only that, like 10 days, that's enough time to save up some more gold to obviously spend on other things in the future. So, and then in conclusion for the news, the winner for the Elder Scrolls Legends Weekly Warp Meta Weekly, number 40, was Corvus BG with the runner-up of Thalon Dark. So, and did you figure out?
I couldn't find an answer. I will say, I think it's interesting that it's the Festival of Madness, considering we are still awaiting an announcement on the Shivering Isles release date. I don't know. Maybe at the end of the week they'll give us a release date. That would be
It sounds
cool.
very festival. I like that.
One more minor announcement. As of right now, unless plans change, I will actually be co-casting the Warp Meta this Sunday, Warp Meta 41. I don't know who my co-caster is supposed to be. That's still sort of getting figured out. It'll be, but one way or the other, if I'm on there, definitely come check it out, and you can hear my my opinions and commentary on things.
That is awesome, dude. I will be sure to at least check it out despite my busy schedule. All right, so like DeadBrokeNerd was saying earlier, this specific episode is going to talk about some gameplay mechanics and how those things work. So we're going to be covering things like the 2-lane mechanic, how that works with the shadow lane, the field lane, the ring of magic, and the runes. This is more an episode more specifically towards the newer players. I don't think we're going to be covering anything specifically for older players, except for a couple of keynotes that I found interesting. But so you might find something useful as an older player listening to this episode, but for the most part, it really is about new players.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go ahead and get this started. And one of the things that I said last week that was very unique about this game, let me go ahead and close this chat box, was the 2-lane mechanic. This is interesting, unlike other CCGs that I've seen, in the fact that you're kind of playing two boards. And what I mean by kinda is whatever you summon in the left hand of the board, the field lane, or if you summon on the right hand of the board, the shadow lane, they can't attack people in the other lanes, okay? And this adds a strategy aspect to it, and unless of course there are rules to the exception where something can attack on the other lane and so on, but for the most part, basic rule of thumb, unless the card says otherwise, cards can't attack cards from the other lanes. So more specifically, we're going to talk about what these specific lanes do, talking about the field lane and the shadow lane. But I felt as if the shadow lane should be talked about first, because the shadow lane has a very uniqueness to it that other CCGs don't actually have, and how that actually can help you as a player in Legends. So for starters, let's go ahead and look at the shadow lane here. The shadow lane is on the right hand side of your screen, and when you summon a creature there, it has kind of a cloud animation going over it. And what this allows your creature that you've just summoned to do is to survive around against other creatures. Creatures on the enemy team can't attack this creature in the shadow lane. I do want to note, however, that unless it's a guard cannot have this effect be placed on it, and it can still be killed by other action cards, okay? There are also some exceptions, such as Underworld Vigilante, which whenever you summon her on the board, she has charge, and she gets rid of the shadow effects, the shadow lane effects to that lane. Also, on a final note, creatures can also lose cover from silences. So if you drop your Shadowfen Priest on the board and you want to get rid of that pesky creature on the shadow lane, you can silence it, and then it loses its cover. All right, is there anything that you want to add to that? I feel long-winded.
Oh, no, that's okay. Yeah, I mean, we were just sort of talking about the cover mechanic. There are a few cards that can actually give cover, like the Gloom Lurker and the Shadow Master. There are, I think, right now, outside of silences, there are exactly like 2 cards, maybe 3, that remove cover, so that's very rare. But keep in mind, not just action cards, but also creature effects. Something like Blackhand Messenger, when it comes down, it can deal 2 damage. Those creature effects can still target creatures in the shadow lane.
So that's just some interesting things about the shadow lane. Um, there's not much to say about it. I can't really beat a dead horse on that. So let's go on ahead and move over to the field lane. Um, unlike the shadow lane, when you summon a creature in the field lane, it does not gain that shadow effect, right? So for the people actually watching the talk show, either on YouTube or on the show right now, we have a picture here, and we have 4 creatures on the field lane, right? And we have a creature here in the shadow lane. And the shadow lane, you can see that it has the clouds. So this creature can't be attacked until the next turn, right? But here for the field lane, as you can see, uh, during this game, I controlled the field lane, and this is a strategy that you want to implement whenever you're playing something like an aggro deck, or a mid deck, maybe some control decks. It really depends on your playstyle. But the reason why you want to control the field lane so much is because whenever, and just like I said, whenever you summon a creature in the field lane, it doesn't gain that shadow ability, and so you're gonna force the other player to respond. So as long as you're controlling that field lane, that forces them to summon something that you can control, and it's harder to control something when it's in the shadow lane because your creatures can't kill it. So for the most part, with certain decks such as aggro, you're not going to want to summon into the shadow lane unless you absolutely have to. Yeah, so something that you want to add on to that?
Well, I have sort of a
You
I
can
guess we're
disagree with
talking
me.
field lane versus
Mhm.
shadow lane.
Mm.
One of the hardest things in the game is understanding when to, or like which lane to put a creature in, and then if you've got a bunch of creatures in one lane, when should you switch over to the other lane? There's finite space, and understanding which creatures to place in which lanes and such is something that you have to develop a knowledge of. There's a few components that go into it. One, you have to understand the current flow of the game. Are you if you're playing a an aggressive deck and your opponent is sort of you're running out of cards, um, continuing to mash minions or creatures into the um, field lane, even when your opponent has plenty of creatures there that can just remove it, is not always wise. Remember, the reason why the field lane is important for you to control is because if you have creatures in the field lane and your opponent plays a creature in the field lane, that creature doesn't have cover. Therefore, any of your creatures on your next turn can attack that creature and kill it. And because you have the priority, it'll be your turn to attack before that creature can attack unless it has charge. You can choose which of the creatures. Maybe you have a creature with ward and you're going to attack the opponent's creature with your ward creature, therefore not losing any of your creatures in the trade. The trade being creatures on either side attacking. And of course, you want to set up favorable trade. So creatures with higher defense attacking a creature with lower attack so that your creature, while it will get injured, it still won't die. And if it doesn't die, it's still contributing threat to your opponent's face or to more of your opponent's creatures, depending on what your priorities are. So keeping that in mind, that is the goal of the field lane. The goal of the shadow lane is going to be I have lost the field lane, or I have a creature that I absolutely have to protect, something that has a very valuable effect, like a goblin skulk. A goblin skulk being a 2-cost creature that when it attacks your opponent's face, it has the pilfer effect. And so it will pull a 0-cost card from your deck and put it into your hand. There's a lot of combo decks or even aggressive decks that want to find those 0 costs. And so you want to protect your goblin skulk. If you put your goblin skulk in the field lane and then your opponent plays a charge minion like a Nord Firebrand with a buff, or if they want to play a Candlehearth Brawler, then your creature will die before it ever gets a chance to use its effect. So that's a reason why you might want to put something in the shadow lane. One last point on this is that understanding your deck's win condition as well as your opponent's class and their corresponding cards that could be played in response to your plays, they're all important to figure out which creature you should put in which lane, and are all sort of part of this complex formula that you can only really you can like learn the foundational elements like control the field lane, but sometimes if you're playing an aggressive deck, which a lot of new players do, you really need to learn how to utilize the shadow lane, because by playing a minion or a creature in the shadow lane, you're allowing it to sit and hopefully not be interacted with by your opponent until your next turn, so you can get that extra attack to the face before it gets killed. So learning to utilize the shadow lane when you're the aggressor is really, really important. Just as much as it is as figuring out my deck versus my opponent's deck, which deck is the more aggressive deck. And we're going to talk about that right at the end today.
Right, I do want to add a couple of things to what you just said. He did say, DeadBrokeNerd just said that that there were uh, a limited amount of space in each lane. I don't know why we didn't have this in the notes, because it is very important to the gameplay. You can only have 4 creatures in a lane, and this could actually be used to your advantage. Okay, so just because there's a limitation doesn't mean it can't be used. For example, you can have a haunting spirit, right? And you have the lane control. She attacks to the face, right? Now she has a last grasp, and you can actually replace that card. You can take one of your other creatures, replace her, and then she's going to randomly give one of your other creatures +3/+3. Hopefully it's one of the attacking cards, so there's a little bit of RNG there. But you also have some other RNG mechanics. I mean not RNG, but last grasp abilities that can actually really help her out. And for the new players, I do want to say last grasp is a creature description that allows whenever the creature dies for an effect to come in. So specifically for haunting spirit, when she dies, +3/+3 to another creature. Another thing that I do want to add on here, and we talked about this in our first episode, on the Frostbark episode with Deathhound, and the reason why I want to bring that back up is because Nerd noted that Deathhound would have been actually a really, really good card if it didn't have Guard. And this goes back to the fact that Guard cannot have the effects of the Shadow Lane. Now, if Deathhound had, was not a Guard card, you could have protected it. You could have dropped it in the Shadow Lane, let it sit there, and protect it. And that's part of the, purpose of utilizing it. Now, I think something for a lot of newer players that you need to get used to, just like Nerd said, was trying to figure out when you should use the Shadow Lane. But I also want to add on to that as well by saying learning what decks are out there, learning what's in the meta. Okay, I'm not even playing. The other day, I played this deck that I don't even know what it was. All right. And I had one of my viewers, they go, okay, go through the graveyard. And he said, yeah, make sure that she doesn't live until round 12, because the specific deck that she was playing, when she hit round 12, she's going to beat me. And sure enough, game went to round 12 and she beat me. And if I knew what that deck was, then I could have responded differently, knowing, okay, she's going to want to control the field lane based off of the specific deck she's playing, because I've seen this before. So kind of get used to what's when you're playing the ladder, pay attention to what's going on, because if you notice a lot of the time, like you're facing a lot of aggro decks. Okay, so what can actually control an aggro deck? I have found, and this is the reason why I've actually been playing with Archer here a little bit recently. I have found that dealing with having lethal cards in your deck can easily get rid of an aggro warrior deck. So just pay attention to those kind of things and being like, okay, aggro warrior is in the current meta, so aggro warrior wants to control the field lane, so I need to control the field lane for them. But maybe specifically for your deck, it's better to control the shadow lane, but knowing that you're playing an aggro warrior and knowing that you have the assets such as lethal to get rid of aggro warrior, control that field lane. Don't let them have it. Don't let them have it. So that's just reiterating what Nerd said and me emphasizing, what he said.
Yeah. And one last thing to remember, there are plenty of cards, especially in green, that allow you to move between the lanes. There's a very powerful green card that's a 1-cost action called Shadow Shift, where you can move a creature to another lane and then draw a card. It's used in almost every green deck. And that's a card that allows you to, if you put something in a lane and you realize, crap, maybe I shouldn't have put it in this lane, or my opponent responded differently than how I expected, you can move away from that lane or into a lane where you need to kill something. So there are decks, including one that I play on stream a lot, where you move between lanes intentionally to try to confuse your opponent and stop them from setting up favorable trades. So there's a lot of interplay in the lanes. It's not like 2 separate game boards. They interact quite often.
All right. So let's go ahead and move over to the next subject, and that's the Ring of Magicka. We're going to spend some time on the Ring of Magicka, because some people, for a long time, almost since the release of the game, we've wanted to see some changes. Now, if you get the Ring of Magicka, it's for the second player, and you'll see it on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. The Ring of Magicka allows the second player to gain an advantage to make up for the fact that he's not the first player. So every turn, you gain 1 Magicka, round one magicka, round two magicka, round three magicka. The ring of magicka allows a second player to kind of catch up with the fact that he's not the first player. So let's say on first player round one gets one magicka, then you got, your turn, you have one magicka, then it's their turn, they have two magicka, and so they have an advantage here. So this is something that the developers, this is all the way back in the Direwolf days, Direwolf decided to implement in order to try to balance the game by allowing you to use this ring 3 times, once per turn, to allow you to get an extra magicka for that turn. So the first player plays, then it's your turn, and you hit it, and now you have 2 magicka before he gets 2 magicka. So, some players actually think that instead of it actually balancing the game, it's actually broke it. I've heard, I don't have any sources, I've heard that some people up at Bethesda, at Sparky Pants, CVH, so on and so forth, have said, according to the data that we have, this isn't actually broken. I don't know that. I don't know if that's true. I don't have a source on that. So they haven't decided to fix it. There have been some suggestions, like there's a delay in it being used. For example, you hit the Ring of Magicka on round 2, it's your opponent's turn. It's round 3, you can't hit it again until round 4. So it's just something to try to help balance the game. I kind of like that idea. It doesn't. I agree with it, and I disagree with the fact that it does need to have the delay ticker. This is just me personally, from what I've seen. Because, let's say, for example, Telvanni conscription, even though it's a huge part of the meta, even it having the Ring of Magicka doesn't put it at a huge advantage, right? But let's say you're playing Aggro Warrior, which is one of the other decks that are part of the huge meta right now, it's playing right into their hand because they're an aggressive deck. So they have the Ring of Magicka, they're able to play cards faster than the other player, and so if they have a good curve in their hand, they have a 2, 3, and a 4, they're already dropping cards that can really help them out. So the 2 cards that come to my mind right now and an aggro deck would be a Young Mammoth that does 4 damage to the face, and a Bleak Coast Troll that does 5 damage to the face, and you're already dropping those things before the other player can actually have a response. So I would at least, this is just me personally, I think it would be really cool if the developers would test it out for a season. Just be like, let's go on ahead and see the delay. Let's see the data. Let's see if it actually changes things up. Maybe we would see less aggro warriors. I don't know. And if it doesn't actually help, they could just revert back to the other style. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I'm just saying, like, one season it would be nice. Shake it up a little bit. Let's try something new. A lot of the players have been asking for this for a while, so let's just play with it. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
So from what I understand, and this may be different in this last, couple months, it's been a while since I've looked into it. The win rate between first and second player is very, very close to 50%, which is good. That's the ideal outcome. The problem with the ring is not that first and second is evening out, but it's rather the problem that the ring right now does 2 things. It almost certainly guarantees the winner of an aggro versus aggro matchup, which is not really what you want to see. Now, the aggro v aggro matchup, I don't know what the stats are. I'm not going to give you a stat that I'm making up. That's not right. But the aggro v aggro matchup with the ring, just from my personal experience, is extremely favored towards the aggro deck that has the Ring of Magicka. Why? Because it effectively switches first player. For the first 3 turns, the second player is able to establish a 2-drop on turn 1, a 3-drop on turn 2, and a 4-drop on turn 3 if they curve out. Now, obviously, this doesn't, this doesn't
Always happen,
but it happens often enough when you consider that aggro decks are a primarily low curve archetype that rarely has creatures coming in higher than cost 5. So consider, of course, that like by effectively switching the first player in the 3-4 turns that actually matter, right? When the game is ending around turn 6 or 7 on average, it's obviously not doing what it's intended, right? It's not really creating parity, but it's rather switching the circumstances. The other thing to consider is the Ring of Magicka has very little impact on. I say very little. It has some impact, but it really has very little impact on control versus control matchups. All it really does at this point in the game is tell the second player that they're going to be able to play their Tullius's conscription first, right? Um, it's interesting because I think that the Ring of Magicka is not a bad thing inherently. I think the Ring of Magicka needs to be there, and I think that a slight adjustment, like which is what I've been proposing for months, which is that it have a one-turn cooldown. So that if you are playing second player in an aggro v aggro situation, you have to choose. Okay, I probably do want to use this now because it's going to have a one-turn cooldown, but I won't be able to get out a 3-drop on turn 2 after getting a 2-drop on turn 1. Right? I'll be able to get ahead of the curve on turn 1 and turn 3, or on turn 2 and turn 4, right? And so that will create, I think, and obviously, a little bit more parity between the first and second player, even though the win rates overall, which don't reflect specific matchups, but rather reflect the entirety of aggro and combo and control and mid range, and all the different interactions and situations, including bad hands, including good hands. I think that it is already a good tool, but it's not perfect. And I would like to see Sparky Pan spend a little time trying to refine it. Fun fact, actually, Major Broski, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, it was not an indestructible item. It was a support that could be destroyed by support removal. Fun fact. So if you held it too long, somebody could come along with the Shadowfen Priest and blow it up. It's
That
pretty
is
cool.
awesome, dude.
Yeah.
That was.
They switched it away because people were doing that, and then I think they wanted to introduce things like Tower Alchemist, where like it wouldn't, like Tower Alchemist, you don't lose charges when you activate them. So they they wanted to have more support removal or support buffs and stuff like that, and so Tower Alchemist being something that would make it a little stupid. Free mana for everyone. Of course, now we have Nixox, so it's like, why bother? That's free mana.
Right. That is awesome, dude. Yeah. I'm a newer player, so if some of you guys don't know, I've only been playing for 3 months, and DeadBrokeNerd, he's been playing since the dark times. Yeah. So he knows he knows a little bit about this awesome stuff that I don't know. I've this season I've played a lot of Aggro Warrior, and I have definitely seen where, for me as well. So I can't just say I'm aggravated at this because it's worked against me. But like whenever I start up the game and I see that purple red logo on the enemy side of the screen, and I'm holding purple red, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and it says you play first, and I'm like, oh no, and then whenever it says you play second, I'm like, I win. Like that's the thought, like going into the game. And I don't want that kind of feeling when I'm a player. I don't want to just go into a game and go, I win. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that feel. People want, I mean, some of you guys might actually want it, but at least I want to get into a game and actually have a fair fight.
Well, and like I said, I think that when it comes to like the mid-range, everything except for aggro, I think that it ends up being a pretty good balancing act. I just think that the way that it's working right now is just that it is too favorable for aggro decks. And I think that putting a cooldown on it will iron that out a bit. Now, the other thing to remember, of course, is that having the Ring of Magicka with a bad opening hand is pretty much worthless. So, like, what we're talking about is not, like, I just want to clarify, like, we're not talking about, like, every match, it's always amazing. There's no times when it's bad, right? We're not saying that. We're saying like across a wide scope of games, this is the data that we as personal players have gathered, and as a community, there's been discussion about this, right? So I just, before somebody tries to tell me about the situation when it's bad, there are situations where we're going second and having the Ring of Magicka in an aggro matchup might be bad. You get a bad opening hand. Well, it's already bad. It's not really have to do with your opening hand. It doesn't have to do with the Ring of Magicka. It has to do with your opening hand. I'm just clarifying that. This is not an end all be all. The Ring of Magicka is an auto win for aggro decks. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
You can totally lose. You can get outplayed. It's just leverages somewhat of an unfair advantage. I think, considering the archetype we're talking about. You want to talk control, you want to talk mid-range, you want to talk combo, not as big of a deal. I'm happy with how the Ring of Magic is operating in those sorts of environments. But in the archetype of aggro, I think that it could use a little more refinement.
Mm-hmm. And I said this at the beginning when we talked about the Ring of Magicka. I would just like to see how it would work with the delay. I don't know.
They could always switch it back.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like just for a season, At the end of the season, you get your top 100 players, and everybody gets to talk about whether or not they like it. It was a worst decision. All the players hate it, and they throws off all the statistics. And just move it back. I mean, this game's still like, even though it's been out for a couple of years now, we've just switched to a newer client, and so there's definitely improvements, and we would like to see some new things. And not only that, just like with Magic the Gathering, I've said this before, I've experienced in Magic the Gathering, they sometimes change rules for seasons just to see. So like, to keep this game alive, to keep it fresh, maybe if it worked really, really good, next season take it off, and then like 3 seasons later put it right back, just for a mix up. I don't know, that'd be interesting.
I think Sparky Pants, not saying Sparky Pants in particular, but I think card game developers for digital card games, I think they fall into the trap of, oh no, we don't want to mix things up, we don't want to piss people off. But then you've got games like, and I said this on my stream the other day when I did an impromptu Dota 2 stream. Dota 2 is constantly shifting, constantly like updating and vastly changed. They just changed the map again. Okay, that's good. That's bound to piss someone off, myself a little bit. I definitely died to a different uphill mischance than I expected. But anyways, but it's something that where like you'll never know how much better it can work if you don't change it, and you can always roll that stuff back. Like it's not a physical card game. Like you can change the text on the cards, right? It's digital. Magic can't go back and find everybody's copy of, I don't know, name a Magic card, pacifism, and change a little word on there. They can't do that.
Right. All they can do is just say, the card's banned.
They have to ban it. We get to change it.
Right.
And that goes not just for the card texts themselves, but for the base rules and some of those things. I'd like to see them, sort of flex those muscles a little bit more in trying to experiment with making the game foundationally better.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a great game.
Oh yeah. So let's go on ahead and move over to runes. Is there anything else? Do we need to keep on beating the dead?
Nope.
The horse? Okay.
Nope.
All right.
I've said my piece.
All right. Let's talk about runes now. As you guys can, for the viewers, not the listeners, when we upload this to the podcast, or the lurkers, we have on the screen the health bar, and the health bar has 5 blue ticks over the health bar, right? And these 5 ticks mark every 5 points of health. You lose 5 health, one of these blue things actually break, right? And when that breaks, that allows you to draw a card. This was implemented into the game to try, as a balancing act, to try to fight against RNG. Now, of course, it's a card game. There's still like a lot of RNG to do with it, but this helps negate that. Just like with the Ring of Magicka, it was implemented to try to negate some of that RNG, and just like with this, is trying to negate some of that RNG. So when this can actually,
and I think it also is definitely in the game to sort of be a preventative measure against snowballing aggro decks. Definitively, because that was a big complaint at Hearthstone for a long time, and Elder Scrolls came up as a direct, or trying to be, not anymore, trying to be a direct competitor to Hearthstone. And so a lot of the foundational aspects are things they were trying to do better than Hearthstone, and many would agree that they succeeded from a mechanic standpoint.
Right. So I'm going to talk about prophecies here, and I'm going to pull up a prophecy card right here. This is lightning bolt. It reads prophecy. So when I hit and a rune breaks, right, then there's an opportunity where the next card that you draw is a prophecy card. If it reads prophecy, the player can play it without spending any magicka. Now, I do want to know for the players, not the players, but the viewers who are actually watching this, where you see lightning bolt and it says 6. I had Witherhand Cultist on play that turn. It's actually a 4 magicka drop. So please don't be confused, okay? So anyways, it's so you can use that for a prophecy. Players can actually also break their own runes And
Hmm.
I do want to emphasize that because I've seen a lot of people make this mistake, especially on a control deck, where they'll actually drop their opponent's health down to 26 to try to help them win towards the later part of the game because they're trying to control. But they forget that the player can actually do self harm with their own creatures. You know, you have like they can even use crushing blow against themselves. They can use I don't know how to say eight's alt. I don't
Afflicted Outlet.
afflicted outlet. They can use afflicted outlet that does 2 damage to itself. Right there, you're drawing another card that's helping them gain back their tempo, and that's also allowing them to do damage. Especially if they have cards in their deck that allows them to regain runes. That's also a thing too. So I would just say and this is something that I said where we're gonna have a little bit for some of the experienced players. This is where the little bit comes in. I've seen a lot of experienced players in the legend. Like I've been playing legend, and I've seen control decks when I'm playing my aggro deck or my prophecy deck, and they get me down to that 26 marker, and I'm like, okay, that's fine, and I use it to my advantage, and that ends up making me win because they're trying to help themselves out when in reality it's actually helping me out. I don't know. What are your thoughts about that as a more
So
experienced player?
you're no, you're totally right. So there's a couple things to consider with managing runes. So one thing to consider is if you're playing an aggro deck, if you are swinging and you know your face is the place, uh, sometimes if you've got one more damage you can do, right? But that one damage is going to break a rune and give him another card for his next turn. Sometimes it's not worth that 1 point of damage this turn, so that next turn he might draw into better removal or another firebolt or something like that. So kind of play it by ear. Sometimes you do need to push that 1 point of damage and really just go all in. But sometimes if you're attacking face and you get him down to 11 and you have a 1 attack creature left, maybe it's not worth attacking him down to 10 unless you're looking at your board and saying, well, I only have 10 damage available next turn. I'm going to hit him down to 1. That brings me to my next point. The exception to the rule of don't hit your opponent down to 26 if you're a control deck. The exception is if you're in the late game and you have whittled him down and he's out of cards and you are heavily controlling the game, you're not attacking because you want to bleed his hand out, aka like you don't want to give him more cards even if you get a board advantage. You don't want to leverage that board advantage until you can win the game. So don't attack him, right? Don't attack your opponent if you're the controlling player, unless you are ready to go and win in either 2 turns or preferably in 1 turn. So what you can do is, if you are in that point where your opponent's out of cards, you're controlling the game, what you can do is, take him down to 26, or if you've already broken rune, take him down to 21, only if you're going to win the next turn with that advantage. You don't want to do that as a habit, but that is the time where you would break that rule. I think there's one other important thing to mention, which is that actually two other important things to mention. This are again for more mid-tier players who want like a little tip, maybe something they hadn't thought about. Drain minions early in the game are generally not good. They can be, right? Playing a Barrow Stalker early in the game, a 2-mana 2/3 with guard and drain can be great, right? But it is not the ideal play if your opponent is a control deck or a mid-range deck. Why? Because you're going to be attacking with it and draining health, bringing your health bar up higher. So it'll take longer for your first rune to break against a mid-range or control-y opponent. Consider that mid-range is sort of having a bit of a revival right now with inclusion of Sword of the Inferno. Not entirely, but to an extent. So like if I'm bringing my health total way up high and then running out of cards, my opponent is attacking me and bringing it back down, potentially that Barrow Stalker could actually hurt me, because I actually do want, even in a if you're the control player, even if you're the control player and you bring down a Barrow Stalker, you don't want to hit face with it. Really, you don't even want to hit a creature with it. You don't want to raise your health total early in the game. You want to raise your health total after you've gotten a couple runes broken and drawn those cards. So that's sort of an important thing. And then the last thing I have to mention, and you can sort of talk about this if you want, Broski. I know you're a fan of this card. Is the Moose. The
Yes,
Moose is
the
sort
Moose.
of changing the way we think about breaking our opponent's runes in these matchups, and hopefully down the road it can, maybe shift these things.
Moose. Yesterday, if y'all watched El Mayo's stream, I played El Mayo on his stream. I wasn't watching him. I was actually watching Justin Larson when this happened, but I knew El Mayo was streaming. And he was playing mid Sork, and I played mid Sork all last season, right? So I get into the game, and I'm playing my Archer deck, and I forgot that Drain does not work against Ward. This is the second time this has ever happened to me, and I was so embarrassed. I attack his Corrupted Shade with Ward instead of hitting for the face, and that made me lose the game because he ended up using a Lightning Bolt, which cost 4 magicka, by the way. And he talked to me after the I went to a stream like right after that, like I closed Justin Larson. I was like, hey Mayo, I played against you and I screwed up. And he was like, dude, don't worry about it, man, I screwed up too. And he's like, man, have you tried? And he's like, man, we were kind of talking back and forth. I was like, dude, I got to 302 last season on Legend Rank. And he says, I added Moose to my deck. And I was like, that's interesting. I added Piercing Twilight. He says, yes, Piercing Twilight's good, but it doesn't actually help against the issues that Mid-Sork struggles with. And I talked about this on our Sparky Pants episode where I was like, hey, Piercing Twilight doesn't actually respond to the single card destructions like I wanted it to. But it's interesting that he noted this, so I decided to play with it a little bit, and it's really, really cool because it gets Mid-Sork right back into the game because they were starting to run out of fuel around turn 7 through 8, and that's right when you draw 7 through 9, excuse me. That's right when you draw Moose. You drop, this is actually Wilds Incarnate. You drop Wilds Incarnate, and then bam, So it's really, really awesome that it's in there. And so somebody who might be playing against a mid-Sork deck, who knowing that this is a potential to get them back in the game, they're like, I'm willing to go on ahead and damage their runes, even though they might have the potential of a Lightning Bolt, because I don't want to put them back into the game later. So I am kind of curious how that is going to shift things up. And I'm actually kind of surprised that I haven't seen a lot more mid-Sork decks do it. And I'm surprised that I didn't even think about it, to be honest, because that's all I did last season. So that's just really interesting that you bring that up. So I'll be playing with that probably a little more towards the end of the season as I try to climb the ladder. I am a little bit bored of mid-Sork, but I'm trying to get to that top 100, and I know mid-Sork best, so we'll see. All right. So, anything that you want to add to runes?
Well, nothing to runes. I did add something to our outline. If you think we have time for it.
Do we have time? We have time.
Okay. So one thing I wanted to talk about past, and we're just talking. This is like the goal of this episode is to sort of be a discussion of general gameplay mechanics, things that make Elder Scrolls different, and things that, like, as a new player, you're looking at, and like, how do I play with this? So, aka the runes, the Ring of Magicka. How do I play the lanes? So I did want to briefly explain in broad strokes for some of these new players that might be listening, the 4 archetypes of decks in Elder Scrolls Legends. Now, there's lots of different decks, right? So you can have warriors and archers and those things. Those are classes, okay? So warrior, archer, Telvanni, those things are classes. That's the color combination of the cards, right? But what I'm talking about is archetypes. Archetypes being, in broad strokes, the general strategy of a deck in terms of when and how it wants to win. Okay, so you have aggro. Aggro is pretty standard. It sort of goes across all different types of card games generally. And basically aggro is through various means. Now, some people say that tokens is different. I say the tokens is kind of part of aggro. But the bottom line is whether through going wide or getting big guys as early as possible, aggro decks want to win the game early. They want to play lots of minions down. They want to drive damage to the face. They ignore the fact that their opponents are going to get a card advantage off of runes. They want to beat their opponent down before the more expensive cards in their opponent's hands can come out. So aggro decks typically would love to win between turn 4 and 7. They don't want it to go much later than that, and a lot of them nowadays would like to win before turn 6, when big board wipes like Ice Storm or even Immolating Blast that saw a little bit of play for a while can come down. So then you have mid-range decks, and that's something Major Broski has actually done a lot more of play testing recently. He's played a lot of mid-sork. I typically really love aggro decks. But mid-range is basically the idea that your deck is flexible, right? Your deck can be a controlling deck against your opponent's aggro deck, or it can be an aggressive deck against your opponent's control deck, right? So a mid-range deck is happy to win between turns really like 6 and 9, right, on average. And sometimes they can win earlier, sometimes they'll win much later. But the idea is they would like to win somewhere in the middle, and they do that by having like a longer curve, a curve that has a curve being like the amount of cards at each cost that you have. So an aggro curve is typically going to cap off at around 5 cost creatures. So they're going to run 3 to 6 5 cost creatures, and that's it. And everything else is going to be a lot of cheaper guys. So like 15 2-costers and such, to try to ensure that they're going to play a lot of those little guys, and they're going to get them in their hands to get that early advantage and drive that early damage, right? Mid-range has a longer curve, so they're going to have some bigger creatures in the mix. So some 6, 7s, 8s, maybe even a 9. Maybe even if they think they have a way to get to it, either via ramping cards that increase your max magicka unnaturally, or cards that maybe like completed contract synergies out of green that can give you temporary increased magic. Maybe they even run a big 12-cost finisher like Odaving, or Parthenax, right? So mid-range has to take a little bit of a more balanced approach, where you get into a matchup and you look at your opponent's class and you look at the cards they start playing and you say, okay, am I the aggressor or the controller in this matchup? And that's how mid-range has to play. It's a very tough strategy to pick up, and one that I think rewards very, very skilled players who know the game very well. So then you have control. And control is just that. You want to bleed your opponent out of resources. You want your opponent's board to be small. You want your opponent's hand to be small, and you're not really worried about winning until those objectives have been completed. They're happy to get to that max magic of 12 or higher if they can ramp, and sit there playing cards that don't actually establish a board position for themselves, but rather are trying to remove the resources that their opponent has. Kill the creatures with lightning bolts at 4 mana. Remove them with ice storms, like big board wipes, or play defensive creatures that protect their life total long enough for them to find their big either big win condition creatures, or in some cases combo effects. Now that brings me to the last archetype, which is combo. And combo is, I'm putting it as its own archetype because it sort of is and it sort of isn't. Combo decks can win either early or in the mid range or in the late game control. Combo is really just a different win condition, whereas control would rather leverage their removal spells and big creatures to eventually swing face. Combo is instead trying to get a weird combination. Let's say like a card that says whenever you play X card, you get a big boon. So anything that sort of takes multiple card interactions, mashes them together for a really powerful effect, and that be the win condition, that's going to be combo. So combo can also be controlling. Combo can also be mid-range, right? But I just am setting this aside because the idea with combo is that it has a specific win condition based on cards interacting with each other, whereas aggro, mid-range, control, a lot of those things are intended intentionally through deck design to be interchangeable, or rather to have creatures, either if you have 15 2-drops in aggro, you don't really care which one you get. They are for the most part interchangeable, creating a system of redundancy. Any of these 15 2-drops that I draw on turn 2 is something I want to see and want to play. And yeah, they'll have different effects, but that's the idea. So I hope that, I know I've just talked for a while, but I had those notes down, and I felt like we throw the words aggro, mid-range, control around all the time, and for newer players, they may not have a breakdown on what those entail. So I hope, and I'm sure I missed something along the line, but I hope that that has sort of contextualized those deck archetypes for you.
So I do kind of want to add on to, he was saying, he made the nerds made the comment that mid decks are content winning rounds 6 through 9. I do want to like add on to your note about all of these decks, just kind of in a lump sum, so people can get a clear understanding. I would consider, there is no general rule of thumb, it's not in a law book, but I would consider, just through observation, early game is rounds 1 through 5, mid game is rounds 6 through 9, and end game or long game, because I've seen rounds like last forever, like round 20 almost, especially control against control. But I would say end game is anything past 9. So 10 and above is is the long game. So I do want to say this: aggro tries to win rounds 1 through 5, and mid-range, I mean, of course they can win earlier, and of course they can win later, just like with aggro. I've even won with an aggro deck in round 10. It happens. It's rare, but it happens, okay? But the goal is by round 5. Mid-range, the goal is by round 6 through 9. However, control and combo, they don't really aim for anything. They just aim for the win. And they're a little bit more complex in its style, because control, for example, they know they're playing against somebody who might be an aggressive deck, so their objective is to control them until the later part of the game. But if they're trying to play against somebody who is also control, they might want to just hit in the face, because they know it's not really going to be that much of an issue. So I don't know, it's just worth considering that there is no general rule of thumb with these things. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Just that I think you're right in that, like, I have contextualized these those archetypes, aggro, mid-range, control, and combo, as generalizations. There are always times where they break the mold. The first time I played up to Legend, I played a heavy control deck out of Archer, but there was a specific matchup, which was a Reteran Praetorian Commander deck, that I knew when I ran up against it, I had to play aggressive, even though I have a control deck. And so I would have to switch my play style to win earlier, because I know that based on the matchup, even though I built my deck not as a mid-range but as a control deck, I knew that I would always lose if I played my win condition. So sometimes you have to, if you have your win condition, and you want to either outgrind your opponent, or you have a big combo and you realize that it's not going to work, it's going to be on you as the player to realize that after a game or two of it not working in a certain matchup, and go ahead and stop and switch tactics and say, okay, now I'm the aggressor. And sometimes you can identify that early in a match. Sometimes you don't identify until later in the match. But as you play, you'll learn when to break these rules of thumb, and when a deck, doesn't fit quite perfectly into any of these archetypes.
Awesome. Let's go on ahead and move over to the Q&A section. Just to let you guys know, the Q&A, we can do it for any time between 10 and 15 minutes. So we're going ahead and get this in here. We don't want to do the Q&A for a whole full-blown 30 minutes, because we are going to have people on YouTube and the podcast who are commuters, so we're not going to try to do it forever. But we got about 10 to 15 minutes to give to you guys. So if you guys have any questions about specifically anything that we talked about, you can do that. If you have any questions directly towards me, or specifically towards DeadBrokeNerd, that's good as well. And it could also be off topic. I want to leave that open to anybody. Yes, the subject is about basic gameplay mechanics, and we of course want to take those as well, but you can also ask why. So first question already.
Yeah.
Blood Warriors Guild, what is your favorite card and why? My favorite card is Shadowfen Priest, because he don't take no shit from nobody.
Oh, that's good.
That's the truth, though. I mean, I just love Shadowfen Priest. I love it too, because somebody would be like, all right, I got an ongoing effect. Bam, get out of my face. Oh man, I just put a whole bunch of buffs on this card. Bam, get out of my face. Oh, I got a guard. Not gonna happen. Get out of my face. I love it, dude. All right, what about you, nerd?
I think I really like Goblin Skulk.
Dude, you suck.
Because I really like aggressive
Oh,
decks. I love green. So I love lane swap mechanics. I think Dune Smuggler is my other favorite. Because I really like swapping a dude and then getting +1/+1. I've been playing that card since the game started.
Nerd doesn't know what
So
he's
I've been
talking
playing Dune
about.
Smuggler
No,
and
don't listen
Goblin
to this
Skulk
dude.
for ages. I also really like Skaven Pyromancer.
Okay, I could
But
dig
he's not that
Skaven.
good
Yeah,
anymore. I mean, it's okay. It's just not great
I could
without
dig with Skaven
Impact.
Pyromancer. I hate dealing with Goblin
I
Skull,
like
dude.
I like Skaven Pyromancer. I like that he does a little blanket effect that also hurts your guys and makes him sort of strategic to play. And I think he'll get a resurgence soon. So
I said this the other day when we were talking about the Frostbar collection. I really think that we're gonna see more use of action cards in the future, and I really think it's gonna have something to do with the Madhouse set coming up. It just makes sense, you know, to do like
yeah,
silly things and add whatever. I mean, there's so many cards like in the Frostbar that I just found where I'm like, you know, where it's like, man, these cards are kind of weird, but then I'm like, you know, if we had an action deck, that'd be pretty cool. So, you know, we have
yeah.
12 Extortionist extra magicka. We have the Destruction Tutor, two less for action cards. So I don't know.
Mhm.
This is just me, you know, being
Yeah.
taking a guess. So anyways, let's go on ahead and move to the next question. What card do you hate and why?
Hmm.
Mm. Oh gosh, I can't think of his name right. It's I can't think of the name, and we talked about it. I think Nerd would agree with me on this one. It's the card that makes mummies in hand.
Yes.
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 Yes. What is the name
Oh
of it?
God, that card needs to be deleted from the game.
I hate that
Like
card.
there are cards out there that I think need nerfs that are just detrimental to the overall balance of the game. And then there's the Hallowed Death Priest. Holy hell.
Dude, I
That
hate
card,
that card.
just needs to be proverbially burned at the stake.
Oh, dude.
Ugh.
Yeah, no. The Death Priest.
There's no counterplay. You can't. The only counterplay is not drawing creatures. That.
I do like it though. I will say this. I really like it whenever they will like try to hit you in the face and break your runes, and they'll drop Death Priest, and all you have is actions and items. I don't know. I like that. That's like the good feeling. That's like the only thing that does counter it when you don't draw a creature. But the thing is, you have that RNG aspect where you're most likely gonna draw creatures, so it's awful. I hate it, dude.
That card needs to be removed from the game. And even from a game perspective, like hand destruction should not exist in a game like this. Okay. The only other like serious hand destruction is Gentleman Jim Stacy. He's unique. You can play around it. Like Hollow Death Priest is a 3/5 body on a 5-drop isn't terrible. It's in purple, which can ramp, and so if it has more max magicka, you can slap it down in conjunction with another removal play on turn 9. You can play it on top of a lightning bolt, right? And then and again, there's no way to play around it. There's no you don't those the cards that it removes in terms of the mummies can't go in your graveyard, so you can't recall them. Oh my gosh, the card is terrible design. It's like the definition of negative play experience.
How would you how this is a question from me to you, I
I've
guess.
tilted several times on
How
stream.
how would you feel if they just dropped it to one use? Like
You mean
only
like
one
make it a
one in the
unique?
deck. You make it a unique. Only one. How would you
I
feel
guess
about
I
that?
would hate it less. I'd still hate it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you ask me, what they should do is go the route of Gentleman Jim Stacy, which is your opponent chooses a card in their hand, that card becomes a 2/2 shriveled mummy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Gentleman Jim Stacy is a 6 or 7 cost unique green card that when it comes in, your opponent chooses a card in their hand and gives it to their opponent. If the Hallowed Death Priest let me choose which card in my hand I would turn into a 2/2 mummy, preferably any card, so I could turn if I had an extra execute in hand that we're now in the mid game and my opponent's unlikely to play, you know, a 2 attack or lower creature, then I could turn my execute into a 2/2 mummy, right? That would be great. And effectively, outside of super greedy decks, I would suspect people would stop running it, which is the goal.
Okay, so we got a question from Sleepy Hollow. What is your favorite Elder Scrolls game? Legends? Question mark. Um, gonna burn me at the stake here. I think Legends is a spin-off Elder Scrolls game. So when you ask me that question, I kind of feel like that's unfair. I love Legends. It is by far currently it is my favorite game right now. I've put so much. That's all I play. Like that's all I do right now. Like even on my off time, I stream it. I play it. I'm this is the reason why I put on my Twitter post. Elder Scrolls Legends helped me find my identity because as a content creator, not like my identity's in Jesus. Yes, I just Jesus juked y'all, but like but what I mean by like as a content creator, it is Elder Scrolls Legends. So I just love Legends. So as far as like an actual like legitimate Elder Scrolls game, like which one's my favorite in the actual legitimate series, that goes to Oblivion. Yes, it's cheesy. Yes, it's corny, but take it or leave it. I don't care.
You
So
said your answer is Legends. Oh,
he said, what are both of y'all's favorite Elder Scrolls game, comma, Legends asking, and I'm like, I think Legends is a spin-off game of the Elder Scrolls series. If you want me to ask, if you want to ask me what's my favorite in the actual series is, it's Oblivion. But I really do like Legends. I love Legends. I really, really do, and it's taken up my life right now.
I hear you. I hear you. I mean, I guess if you're including Legends, I'd have to say Legends. But if you're not including Legends, I guess I'd say Skyrim. But I really liked the Guild Quest lines in Oblivion. And I'm not a huge nerd. I am a huge nerd. I'm not a huge Elder Scrolls nerd, so I don't know like all the lore and I don't remember everything. I remember playing a lot more of the quest lines in Oblivion and then just sort of roaming more in Skyrim. But I tell you what, the Skyrim combat system was significantly better. So I feel like that was a big like thing for me. I do want to answer one more thing. Angelus Solus mentioned that Shadowfoot is similarly aggravating. So Thieves Guild Shadowfoot, that's a 3-mana 2/2 that steals the top card of your opponent's deck, puts it in their hand, and then gives a 0 cost card that says take 1 damage, draw a card, so it replaces itself. It is pretty aggravating, but I will say I don't mind that. I don't mind stealing cards off the top of the deck because it's something that if you're playing a deck that like you're playing a journey deck and they lose the 1 copy of journey, that's unlikely to happen. So it doesn't bother me as much. I don't care for Shadowfoot personally, but I don't think it's faulty design. I think hand destruction is just bad design. So that's the difference there.
I'm trying to get people to go see your YouTube channel, and okay, there we go. No, it's not. Okay, I don't understand the issue.
It's okay. I'm DeadBrokeNerd across all the social medias, including YouTube, so you
There
can
we
just
go.
find it
All right,
later, guys.
there we go. So I was actually gonna put your link in our chat box for your YouTube channel because of another question, and it just worked out because Blood Warrior said he had to go, and I was trying to give him saying, hey, the last section will be on YouTube if you want to see it. But there was a question here that says, what cards would you like to see buffed / nerfed? DeadBrokeNerd actually just released a YouTube video here recently on what card should be buffed, right? Or nerfed?
Nope.
No.
It's not done yet. It's in post.
Okay.
It will
Okay.
be up this week.
Okay.
Probably after Thanksgiving, but yeah,
So
it's 5 cards that need to be nerfed.
So, you know what? I'm kind of a new player. I've only been playing for 3 months. I think it's unfair for me to say this. So we're gonna leave this question for DeadBrokeNerd, and I want, because you're having a YouTube channel, so let's go on ahead and have just a taste. Tell us 1 nerf and 1 buff that you're gonna add to your YouTube video, and if people want to see the rest, you have to go check out his YouTube channel. So go on ahead, give us a taste.
So buff. I haven't decided yet. The thing with buffs is that you need to take a card that sees 0 play, and then put it, and then by making it relevant, do you vastly shift the environment? So there's a couple cards have been floating around doing this card should be buffed little segment, but I haven't decided one. I do. That's down the road. My video is going to be 5 cards that need to be nerfed now. And this is all personal opinion. If you disagree with me, cool. I don't care. But I'll tell you one that I think people don't think about. I think that Cruel Firebloom needs to be nerfed.
Huh. How so? How
Cruel
so?
Cruel Fire Bloom is vastly outperforming all other zero cost cards. And in conjunction with the ability of both Assassin and most notably Telvanni to be able to utilize Goblin Skulk to tutor zero cost cards into your hand, combined with the powers of several like small, high impact blue creatures like Shrieking Harpy, Wardcrafter, Blackhand Messenger, creatures that once they come in and have their effect, they're small, contribute much to the board.
We're having issues with you, bud. Hello?
What's up?
We were having issues with you. You just kind of like glitched
Oh
out, bro.
no.
Yeah, no, you're back now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All I was saying was that the ability to tutor it with Goblin Skulk and Telvanni and Assassin, where we've started seeing more and more controlling Assassin builds that are basically taking it's Telvanni light, and even like some Nixox combo decks. There are so many cards that have high impact value once they come in, and afterwards have minimal impact value on the board. And Cruel Fire Bloom allows you to turn that into a counterplay that is vastly disproportionate with a zero cost card. So hitting a random creature for 5 damage is like for 0 mana, even though you have to sacrifice a creature of your own. We're seeing it like played so much more than any other zero cost card is being played. And it is just too easy and too detrimental of a play in these control decks, especially ones that want to utilize conscription. That I think it deserves to be nerfed, either up to 1 magicka so that it cannot be tutored with Goblin Skulk, or maybe even shifting colors, or probably reducing the damage. So deals 3 damage or 4 damage to a random enemy creature. I mean, consider that this deals 5 damage to a random enemy creature, but don't forget, if you have a Cruel Fire Bloom and your opponent has 2 creatures, and it's turn 4, you can lightning bolt one of them and then Cruel Fire Bloom the other, and it's a guaranteed hit. So playing creatures, it can go into the Shadow Lane. It can so like it's just too much for its zero cost mana. That's what I would nerf. I would increase its cost by 1. I suspect its play would drastically decrease, but ultimately that card is just it's too much for the mana cost.
All right. All right, guys. So, well, we're about an hour and 10 minutes into the stream, so we're going to end it right here. DeadBrokeNerd is actually about to stream, so what we're going to do, we're going to go on ahead and do our outro, and we will go straight into his channel. I do want to go on ahead and note that you guys should definitely, if you guys have any recommendations for future episodes, or if you have any questions, feel free to tweet me at capital MAJ underscore, well, I guess it doesn't matter. Yeah, capital MAJ underscore capital, all capital, broski. At the Twitter page, and also don't forget to tune in next week. We will be here on my Twitch channel at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that would be 4 p.m. GMT. We try to do this every single Wednesday, and if you guys miss a section of the show, it will be uploaded to DeadBrokeNerd's YouTube channel as soon as you can get it on there. Just take a note on this, guys. YouTube, I have to actually send him the file because I'm recording it while we're streaming, so he gets the best quality, number 1. And then number 2, he has to render it himself, upload it to YouTube, and depending on how much traffic is on YouTube at that time, it does take some time. So it might not get uploaded tonight, but it will probably most definitely get uploaded by tomorrow. So just take that into consideration. So just keep an eye open for that. It'll be here within the next couple of days, all right? So anyways, until next time, peace out, love life. Thank you guys so much for coming into the stream, and hop on over to DeadBrokeNerd's channel to go watch him play some Elder Scrolls Legends.